All right, this video series has been awesome. We've trekked through the consumer's guide to buying a franchise. Today, we're going to hit the last portion of this, which is before you sign the franchise agreement, what you need to know. Coming up next. All right, Brent. So the last section here talks about what you need to know before signing this agreement, and it goes through like accountants and lawyers, banks and financial institutions, Better Business Bureau, government. I mean, it's basics here, but ultimately, I mean, my viewpoint. I'm gonna kick off the statement, then you tell me yours. I'll keep mine very brief. I think at the end of the day, and I see this far too often, a franchise buyer gets to the finish line and they still have this misconception that they open up this business and magically it's going to make money. Buying a franchise is super hard. So I think forget about legal stuff. Like the last step is like, are you sure mentally you're ready to do this? And are you mentally ready to scale? And when you and I've talked about this, I have this rule of 3, be able to afford 3, maybe sign 1, get 2 open as fast as humanly possible, because you're not going to make money on one unit. And yes, there are tremendous people. It's man in a van, chuck in a truck, whatever it's called, where you're replacing a job and you don't really care about scale. You're just like working for yourself. Like totally respect that. But if you're getting into franchising to build wealth, then you got to come into this knowing you're going to work hard. If you were to open up a small business, you have to crank even harder because you got to go through building a brand and a website and everything else. And so you're skipping the line here, but that doesn't mean you're skipping what it takes to be an entrepreneur, which is like the willingness to bust through brick walls. And I think that's more important, all above everything that's in this guide. But what's your viewpoint on that final step?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think most people, the majority of our franchise buyers, the motivation is financially driven. They want to make money more than they want to enjoy what they do or build a legacy or the other long list of reasons. And if that's true, then most franchise buyers need to come in with the right mindset. And the right mindset oftentimes just isn't there when they're at this stage. People kind of hear what they want to hear. Got an example of a franchise we just invested in, and the average, say that I won't throw out the numbers to give any clues away, but say the average territory across the entire system, and primarily corporate locations because it's a young franchise, but say it was $1 million. When we're looking at building a business plan based on what was given to us by the franchisor, the average territory or the forecast was $1 million. And the problem with looking at item 19s and kind of trying to base a franchise, your new franchise, off what corporate may have done or the staff franchisees may have done, it's never apples to apples. Markets are different. In this case, those average territory numbers were of a corporate location that was matured 3 years. And so for a lot of franchisees that don't look at that and understand that as they build their own business plan, they're going to come in thinking they're going to do $1 million first year, not understanding, hang on, took them 3 years to get to that. How long is it going to take us? My point in all of this is people will see what they want to see in an item 19. They'll hear what they want to hear from franchisees during validation. And you really do need to be careful, especially as you get to this stage. Am I being overly emotional in the final part of the decision-making process? Or is there real logic to why I'm buying the franchise and what my expectations should be and what I think I can do? And Nick, I'm pretty sure you see a little bit of the same disconnect too, right, between what the reality is for franchisees and what the marketing and what they've wanted to hear in the process. And I'm curious, how do you coach your franchisees or franchisors even on how to make sure expectations are set when you can so easily go the wrong way with it and set yourself up for disappointment?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're in this weird spot as a franchise community because we have a broker game that's going on selling franchises. We have an organic game that's going on selling franchises. And then the lawyer game, Charles isn't here to defend the lawyer side, but the lawyer game, I would say over the last 8 years, item 19 went from gentle information to now a marketing component of it. And so because of these complexities, it's like you pull on one lever, the other one goes up. So for instance, I was with a brand yesterday. In comparison to two competitors, they were much cheaper from an investment standpoint. It's like, guys, you're saying at your grand opening you want the franchisee to invest $4,000. Your two competitors, one's at $25,000 and one's at $35,000. Yes, that pulls up the lower amount, but what it does is it sets the expectation right, so the franchisee doesn't get in there. And you're like, look, your business isn't going the way that you expected based on these fancy numbers in item 19. You have to spend more on marketing. Now all of a sudden they're going to get stressed out. They're like, but it doesn't work. And so now you're in this constant battle of trying to reset the expectations, which I'll say historically, once there's a flaw in the relationship between franchisor and franchisee, very rare that it recovers. Like it turns turbulent. And we were talking about one of their franchisees who's been in the system. I'm going to put north of 15 years. It's far north than that, but I don't want to give away either. Who when we're talking about trouble spots in their system, this franchisee is a trouble spot. And so now you're in a relationship for an ongoing time in something that is turbulent. It's not good. And in my opinion, it goes all the way back to whether you set the expectations right. So the brokers, like, and this is part of their magic, they say they get paid by the franchisor, which they do. The franchisor is the one that writes them the check, but the check is usually built off the franchise fee that the franchisee paid. So it's like a funneling system. Because of that, the broker is encouraged to help sell that franchise. They're like, you should buy this, or, beep, 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 I worked the personality test and you should buy this brand, even though it has nothing to do with what their passions or their heart and their mind and their gut would tell them. And so the broker side's going on, the organic side, like the Zor wants to sell a franchise and they're conflicted, whether do I sell a franchise or do I develop a franchisee? And then because item 19 and item 5, 6, and 7 are off, now all of a sudden expectations are wacky. So parking that to the side, again, like I think the initial investment, if I were coaching a franchisee, is look at least 2 units of it. So there's initial investment of $1 million, double that. And now back in the napkin, you're going to need to have 20% of that in cash, and then you can find financing for the rest of it. So if it's $1 million investment, you need to open up 2 of them or afford 2 of them. Now you need to come to the table with, call it $500,000 to invest in this thing. It starts setting the tone the right way, because now you're not limping into it and you're trying to build scale and you're trying to build wealth. So all very, very, very wordy to say, I don't think the industry does a good job at setting expectations. I think franchisees get enamored with these numbers in item 19, but most of the time there's a ramp up period to get to those numbers. And the highest performers probably overinvested far beyond what's in item 5, 6, or 7 to make sure that they're going to succeed. And that story doesn't come out. So FTC, shame on you. You shouldn't restrict the item 19 so much. You got to figure out a better solution here so that we can be more transparent with the buyer on setting expectations and not be so restrictive legally on what's in the item 19. Brokers and franchisors, you've got to develop a better relationship. Franchisors, you've got to give the brokers better tools that explain your business so that they're not misguiding your candidates. Then franchisors, you got to do better when you're talking with the franchisees to say, like, this is going to be hard work. And hard work might be like, you did a great job with, I'm going to go ahead and say it because you guys did a tremendous job with Dog Training Elite on scaling it. It can be semi-absentee, but if you're going to get into that, you better be ready to work your ass off for those first 6 months and then park that to the side and go on to the next unit. And if you get in that and you're like, I'm just going to limp into it, it just doesn't work and you fail. And so I think that's where, like, all these words go back to the term expectations, like honesty, expectations, and set them right way. I mean, what are your thoughts on my throw up of words?
No, I mean, it's really good stuff, right? I was focusing a little on item 19. You brought up item 7 as a big potential landmine for folks coming in with the wrong expectations and at this stage. And you're absolutely right. And I guess, like, here's a thought and a question I've had for myself. In the last few years, we've seen we talk about this all the time. We've seen an explosion of lower investment, primarily home services franchises come into the market, positioned very, very well, super attractive, low investment, high profitability. And I think I'm wondering if that's changed the game a little bit for all other franchisors, retail franchises, more traditionally or higher investment franchises. I guess my question, Nick, is do you think the surge of these lower investment brands in the broker groups that are getting a lot of notoriety for minimal cost and high potential, do you think that puts pressure on all other franchisors to tell the best possible scenario that may then in turn affect expectations coming in?
1,000,000,000%. So here's my feedback on that. One, the reason these businesses are exploding is because if you take the service industry, let's say you do pool. I keep on saying this. Pool service is like my Bob or Mary or Jane. It's like I go to pool service when I talk about home. But take a pool service, right? What happens is a mom and pop small business starts it up, non-franchise, and the amount of money that you make per employee is so tremendous that what happens is eventually the employee says, well, wait a second, you pay me $40,000 a year, you're making $500,000. And then the gap or the gap into entry is not tremendous. I could set up my pool service business tomorrow. That's why it exploded, because the business categories didn't do enough to get the margins right. Like a restaurant brand that you or I would work with, like a net is usually the net profit is between 10 and 15 would be tremendous.
Right.
Where a service brand could be 40 to 60. Like so it's so upside down because of the business models that it's allowed so many to get in. With a broker, like the broker is paid based on the franchisee buying. And so if you look at the pathway of least resistance, of course it's easier to buy a man in a van business. They could be signed and open like in 30 days. And so the speed of deal is so high that now if a broker is saying like, here's a smoothie brand X or pool service brand Y, smoothie brand X costs 400,000, service brand Y costs 100. Well, if you get 4 of these, look at your gross sales and your profitability versus fighting for 15% on this one. And so now the brokers are actually fighting against brick and mortar. And for the most part, there's like men's health is now the new hot topic. But for most brick and mortar, the broker competes against it because they're like, why would you invest all of your life savings into one business when you can now have 4, 5, or 6 on a service brand? The flip side of that is retail and food tend to have points of differentiation that are easier to market. Charles and I have talked about this. We've worked with a carpet cleaning franchise that when we went to look at how do we market their service, if you Google carpet cleaning in a market, there's 7,000 matches. So now you're just playing on penny game. It's really, really tough. So like these home service brands, very easy to sell, very difficult to get the revenues going. And so if these operators don't have the right mindset when they get into this, then they're going to open this thing up and they're not going to do the numbers that have been posted all over Facebook. They're going to be quite disappointed. They're going to ask why, and it's because they had no hustle, they had no grit, they're not hitting the community, and they're not spending the money. So all that to say, everything that you said, Brent, the service industry, and because the margins are so high and it's so easy to sell, is totally cannibalizing candidates that 10 years ago a restaurant brand would have said, I want someone with restaurant experience. It shifted to I want someone with money. A service brand was said, have you always wanted to be in flooring? Yes, which is in a huge amount of people. Now they're like, well, let's talk you out of buying a restaurant. So it is complex. And I don't see any pathway of that changing anytime in the future.
Yeah, nor do I, because it's working for the broker community well. And to be fair, there just really are a lot of brands that weren't in existence and a lot of models in the home services spaces that are new offerings that just make a lot of sense for franchise buyers. And that's a great thing. It used to be heavily dominated by retail, by food, and that's just not true anymore. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I do think that if you're trying to compare as the franchisor your brand to a home services investment / return, you're looking at it the wrong way. You're looking at the wrong buyer potentially, and you're focused on the wrong things. And that's a whole other podcast. But I mean, it doesn't detract from the danger that currently exists. Here's another example. I got one for you. So there's a brand that I'm involved with from the franchisor investment side. And it was a Raintree brand, very aware of the franchise sales process. The franchise salesperson we've worked with for 10 years. We worked this brand for a long time, and we knew very well what's been said in terms of what you can earn with the brand. And in this case, it was, we can't talk about that because there's no item 19 yet, it's new. And an issue popped up with a franchisee who sort of said, well, I was told it would be a 20 or a 30% return on this food restaurant-based concept. And we were like, what? There is no way. And of course, we dug in, checked the process. The team did their thing and did a whole bunch of compliance checks and couldn't find anything. And the only potential scenario that was positioned to us after looking into this for weeks was the best we got is this person we know was shown 2 home service brands and a food concept, and they heard what they wanted to hear and got open and then looked for unhappy with one thing that had nothing to do with financial return and said, well, I was told this. They were probably told that from a broker about another brand, or you just can't control what a broker's saying because they're positioned to make it as attractive as they can. And that's an issue, right? And so if you're a franchise buyer, it comes back to you've really got to make sure you've done your homework on the item 19, on what's a real financial expectation. Don't rely on what a marketing pamphlet says. Don't rely on what a broker says. Don't rely on what one franchisee validation call tells you. Have you done realistically a collective overview of here's all the data points, here's where I think I fit into it, and here's what I think is a fair return? And so many people will just find that one snippet, whether it's something the broker said, as I said before, or one part of an item 19 and say, that's it, that's what I'm guaranteed, and then get themselves into a whole bunch of trouble. And so, yeah, that was a good example of that. And I think you just got to be careful. I think the only other thing that I would add to what we're talking about here, Nick, is, we've touched on item 7. Have you really gone through, to your point, double it? I'd certainly recommend tripling the working capital section. That always gets people into trouble. Go higher end, double it if you want to be really safe, like what Nick said. I think that's fantastic. So we've got, did you triple check the item 19 and is your expectations on what you can earn real? Did you triple check the item 7 and a bunch of data points to understand where you really think you're going to come in? And have you got a rainy day plan in place that protects you there? And I think the only other one, and this is where I think the home services broker conversation comes into play, that we see as an issue right now in expectations are, it was a $50,000 investment that has a $5 million top line revenue item 19 representation. But did you really dive in with the types of franchise owners doing that? Yeah. Do you have the skill sets, number one? Do you really understand what they do each day to achieve that, rather than just running in because the numbers look right and it sounds cool? And so I think that's the third bucket, right, is have you truly validated what you have to do day to day to be successful in the business? And that's one that we're seeing a lot of folks skip over because the allure of these low investment, high return brands is more enticing than I actually don't like marketing and I have to go get my own leads with this service concept. Oh, I didn't know that. And now I'm angry at you and I'm going to terminate. That's the other big one we see. Do you see that one as an issue right now on your end?
Yeah. I mean, so let me say a few comments. One, like what you were saying, I think this, let me back up. I believe I love brands that make the franchisee the hero. So let me be clear on that. Like when I can sense that a brand really cares about the franchisee, I don't care what the widget is, I'm already attracted to that business. However, what you were saying, Brent, I think when you're getting to this finish line, you got to pull up the fattest mirror possible and look in it and stare yourself in the face say, am I willing to take responsibility? Like your story, like you told me this, like that stuff pisses me off. Shame on that franchisee. No, there's no guarantees in life. There are definitely no guarantees in business, and there's no guarantees in small business. And here you are, you're going to blame everyone but yourself. And frankly, I don't. I hope this person ends up seeing it. You're an idiot if you thought those margins were going to exist in food. Like, just watch any video around. They don't exist. Papa John's, like they're somewhere between 8 and 12%, and that's a big brand with all the resources in the world. Come on, get your head out of your ass and look in your mirror and take responsibility. I think that's the biggest issue in all of this is when something goes south, there's no accountability, and it's blame everybody else. And that's on the franchisor side and it's on the franchisee side. Like if accountability doesn't exist, you will never be a great franchisor. If accountability doesn't exist, you won't ever be a great franchisee.
I mean, I love that. I think I hear most commonly the term or the attribute of grit associated with successful franchisees. I don't know, man. After hearing you say that and thinking about it, accountability might be number one. You got to be accountable for your own performance, your own expectations, your own destiny, and you're absolutely right.
Well, that's where like the finish line. Yeah, you logically talk with a lawyer, let them review your FDD, understand like this is an operating manual of the business, or the business viability is the way that I would look at it. Don't negotiate things. Like it's not designed to negotiate. You either like the terms or you don't. Like imagine walking into the grocery store and be like, I know the milk costs $3 today, but I would really like to pay $2.25. Like they're like, go put the milk back and leave our store. And so it's not a business negotiation. So yeah, do all the blocking and tackling, but ask yourself, are you accountable? Last time you screwed up with your spouse, did you blame your spouse or did you take accountability? Like, whether you have the ability to take accountability or not. I see it all the time in running a business, whether someone has it or not. Like, look in the damn mirror and make sure you got that. If you don't, franchising might not be right for you, because the crutch of feeling like because I paid a fee, I get to blame someone else is not that's a unicorn crush. It doesn't exist. Like imagine like walking into the small business retail center that you just opened and be like, well, I thought because I paid for this door that magically the open sign was going to flip over when I walked in. It just doesn't happen. And so I think that's the big hurdle. Franchising doesn't give you permission to blame someone else. Franchising doesn't give you a guarantee. It gives you an awesome box that you can have structure. I bought a golf simulator in a box when I moved to Atlanta. I built it. I put it up myself. It didn't guarantee that I was going to get better at golf. Like it doesn't do those things. So I think that's and then all of this stuff, like that's where, whether you use a broker, you're accountable for whether you bought or not. It's not the broker's fault. You talk to another franchisee and they're like, this is the greatest business ever. It's not their fault that you suck. And not that I want to get deep into this, but each state has different viability too, based on taxes and traffic and cost of living and all these things. So at the end of the day, this is not easy. Franchising not easy. And be sure you look in the mirror. That's my last statement. You?
I will reiterate the three big things to double, triple, quadruple check. That's, do you have the skill sets and do you understand your day to day, or at least that of the successful franchise owners? One, do you truly have a grasp on the item 7 and what it could cost, and how far in the red or beyond the high end of the investment are you willing to go? Validate that with franchise owners. I love your take on looking at competitive brands in a similar space and comparing item 7s, trying to understand why you may be lower or higher with a particular brand. That was a takeaway for me today too. And then again, the third one is item 19, making sure that you're reviewing. Hopefully there's P&Ls in the item 19. Hopefully you get to talk to a large number of franchisees or a good representation of franchisees. And then look inside, accountability as you're really putting that together on what you think you can do too. Those are the big three for me.
I love it. And at the end of the day, we both love franchising. So we're not telling you not to do it. We're telling you just go through the motions to make sure this is the right opportunity for you. Another great episode of Fran X. Brent, thanks for the time. For everybody that watches, you can go backwards and look at any part of our series on this. Appreciate you paying attention. This is Fran X.